So I want you to imagine in your mind's eye an hourglass. And of course, at the top of the hourglass, you have the sand and then the bottleneck and then the empty glass at the bottom. And as time goes on, all of the sand falls from the top to the bottom. Now, you could imagine this hourglass here being the base game of Final Fantasy XIV: A Realm Reborn. And as more and more people started to finish the expansion and finish the subsequent patches, they would reach the bottom of the hourglass, meaning they're done with the story content until new content comes out. And you could picture Heavensward being like an added little bottleneck with an extra piece of glass at the bottom. So now you have like the regular hourglass and then another bottleneck with more glass at the bottom. And then people fall through from Post Realm Reborn into Heavensward. And then once they reach the bottom, they're done. They're out of content until new content comes out. And with every subsequent expansion, you're adding like a little, extra piece of hourglass to this mechanism. And if a new player comes in while Endwalker is relevant, they have to start from the top and then they go through to the next piece of glass, to the next piece until the sand comes at the bottom. Now, what ends up happening, of course, is all of the sand ends up hitting the bottom and then they stay there. And since they stay there, all new sand comes in is going to be the minority, while the majority of the sand is going to be at the bottom because they've been in there, from the beginning. And that's the problem that all theme park MMOs have, that, players accumulate to the end. You have the same thing in World of Warcraft, where once, a fresh server comes out for Classic, everyone's leveling very quickly in that game. Everyone hits level 60, and before you know it, being level 60 is the norm, and leveling becomes a very small minority of players, which creates a situation now where if new players want to come in and, they're starting from level 1, and there's so much content for them to go through before they could play with their friends, this could discourage them, especially if they're social gamers who want to come in to play with a friend group that they already had, or, they just want to, meet new people or whatever it is. So this is kind of an issue. Now, the way that a game like World of Warcraft tries to solve this issue is they've made leveling and the leveling process take, less and less and less time. But this also creates problems. For one, it makes it so the story becomes very difficult to be told in that short amount of time, and it makes the story such a pain to go through, and it makes the leveling experience cheap to begin with, and so then it's almost like, why have it at all? And not only that, but then they just add all their grinds to, they just, flip it over to the end game and make all the grinds in the end game, which is no fun either. Now, the way that Final Fantasy tries to solve this problem is, of course, they offer boosts. And, you can pay the $20, I think, for a level boost and $20 more for a story boost. And you can get through to the end. And you could start at Endwalker and, kind of just be done with MSQ. Now, of course, that comes with its issue. And the big issue that you get if you just give new players the opportunity to just skip the content altogether is it creates the problem now where it cheapens the experience of the game. It even cheapens the experience of the raids and the endgame content. So I'm about to go into some Shadowbringers spoilers in 3, 2, 1. Like the Tesleen fight, where you had, of course, Tesleen, who becomes a Sin Eater in the story, and then briefly after, you go ahead and you fight her in the dungeon, and, you don't think she's going to be there, or you're not expecting her to be there, and then, oh look, it's Tesleen, and it adds more emotional weight, it adds more meaningfulness to that experience of going through the dungeon. And you totally miss out on that when you're going ahead and you're boosting through things. And so now we're kind of back at square one, right? So now how are we going to solve this issue? Now, one potential solution that Square Enix can go ahead and try to do is they can make it so New Game Plus becomes the default, where you start the game and as a brand new player, you're level 90, you're max level. And you can just immediately start doing content with your friends. And if you want to experience the story, that's open for you as well. You can go through the MSQ just like regular, but you don't have to now go through the MSQ to get to the endgame content. Now, like I said, that still leaves you with the problem of cheapening the experience. And all of these raids and, all of this endgame content is so greatly enhanced by going through the MSQ. Not only that, but even the social experience is enhanced because you can, communicate with people who have gone through the game, who have been playing the game for a while, who have reached the end game, who have gone through the story, and now you have something to talk about with them. I do it all the time with my FC. You know, everyone in my FC has finished doing the MSQ, and I'm the laggard. I'm that sand still falling to the bottom. And so, I don't have to worry about going ahead and talking about spoilers with them. I could just be like, oh my God, I just saw this happen. I can't believe that happened. Or this thing just happened in Shadowbringers. Holy shit. And, it's fun. And then when you get to the end game, you can continue to have these discussions. They have discussions in my FC about characters, even though they finished the MSQ. Like, there was an argument that broke out a couple weeks ago about whether Lise was a good character or not. And it was like this heated debate whether or not, she was a character who was kind of, had too many predictable tropes, or if she was like this like innovative protagonist. And, you can have these sort of discussions and enhance the social experience by going through it. But like I said, this leaves the problem now still, where if you wanted to get into the game later, and everyone, or the majority of people, have already gone through the MSQ, what do you do? Like, what happens? And I think this is a problem that all theme park MMOs end up having. However, if you really scrutinize the way that Final Fantasy XIV is designed, you quickly start to notice the ways that they've gone ahead and tried to solve this problem, because I'd be damned if Yoshi P doesn't know that this is a problem, that this problem exists, and he isn't intentionally trying to mitigate this problem. And I think it's mitigated in Final Fantasy XIV much better than it is in the vast majority of other MMOs that exist in the market to date. For example, you have housing, and all the time I find myself going to my FC house, going to the houses of my friends, hanging out at the house, commenting on the design, sitting, in the tub with them and just hanging out. I find myself, doing things like commenting on people's glam and having them, talk to me about glam and, just have discussions about that. And since the social hubs, Limsa Lominsa and Gridania in particular, to some extent Ul'dah as well, are so bustling, and people are just hanging out, you can still go ahead at any time, even while you're going through the story, and engage in a social experience. You also, of course, have bards and music. Not only that, you also have the in-game events, like, I don't even remember what it's called, the Summer Moonfire Fair thing, where you got on the platform and coasted the soul and you hopped up. You were doing that with other people, and you see people fall off, and then they're like shit, and then you laugh, and it's funny. And you all these things. You also have roulettes, for example. Roulettes incentivize people who have already gone through the MSQ, whether it's because they want to level a different job or they want to farm some endgame currency, to go ahead and do that content again. So Sprouts can, 1, go through their MSQ, and 2, engage in the social experience. There's all of these ways that Final Fantasy XIV tries to mitigate this problem. And, there's other ones. There's even in-game events such as weddings that are not, particular to a given season or, a limited time event. You have player-driven events like venues and parties. And, there's all of these different ways that Square Enix tries to innovate on this issue, which is an issue that theme parks have had since the beginning of time, since the beginning of MMO history. Now, is it perfect? It's not perfect, because there's still things that brand new people are going to be barred from doing. They cannot do the endgame raids, for example. They cannot do, basically, like island sanctuaries. You can't do island sanctuaries. And, you can go ahead and visit someone else's island, and this mitigates this problem. But it doesn't exactly solve it entirely. And I don't know if this is a problem that can be solved entirely. But Square Enix seems to do a much better job at minimizing and mitigating this problem than any other MMO I've seen to date. And that's all I had to say for this video. We'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.